Don't know if you've heard about it, but there are reports of discord in the locker room of the defending Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. Certain players on the team don't think that quarterback Russell Wilson is, quote, black enough, unquote. According to some insiders, being black enough is code for being too close to management, but for others, it is a sad commentary on African-American society. Carl Banks understands NFL locker room culture and spoke out on this issue in a recent article. He is two-time Super Bowl champ with the New York Giants, and he's right here in our New York studios here. Welcome to Arise America.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, so great to have you here. Really appreciate it. I want to start off just with your experience of the culture as it relates to race when you were in the NFL. Did you feel a pressure to, as we would understand in our community, represent?
Well, I don't think so. I think, sports is such a universal vehicle of bringing people together. And obviously there are societal issues when you deal with black quarterbacks, like Doug Williams was playing, Warren Moon was playing, and it wasn't that many black quarterbacks when I played, and the expectations were, from the outside, would they be radical, would they be angry, and they were just as skillful, and it was more of a opportunity for these guys to show, hey, look, we're on par with every position in the NFL, but within the locker room, I think the color that everybody most represented was their uniform and the dollar bill. That's really what it came down to. And when you get those bad seats in the locker room that sort of try to plant dissent, you got to get those guys out of there or get them in line.
Yeah, and that's what happened in this case. Percy Harvin was removed from the team, went somewhere else. But there was another incidence of this. If you go back just a few years, you remember there was a lot of friction between Terrell Owens and Donovan McNabb, and a lot of people made the case that Donovan McNabb was not, quote unquote, black enough. So, is this a made-up story that we in the media just like to talk about?
It is. It is, some of this is alleged, but then you've had, analysts from sports networks that asked if Robert Griffin was a brother or a cornball brother. And this was another African-American who posed that question. And, it's a sad commentary on the black culture as a whole. If we can't find a way to be supportive or have real dialogue on what it takes to be better and successful as a group, instead of, pointing and shooting arrows ignorantly at people that are trying to do something successful.
Yeah, and I think that's a point well taken throughout society, and many would even make that same point with the president that we have in the African-American rallying around him. Let's talk a little bit about some of the tough issues that have plagued the NFL recently. Lots of allegation of violence and abuse, even going back to head trauma and what role that might play into it. Talk a little bit about the pressures, if you will, on the players, not only to perform and to produce, but in some cases, for some African-American kids who are plucked out of the inner city, never saw more than maybe $100 at any one time, and then now all of a sudden they're millionaires in an unfamiliar environment.
That's a very important point that you make, because the talent pool that plays in sports right now, this talent pool comes from an era that probably represented the worst that we've seen in our society when it comes to the crack epidemic and the disruption and destruction of family. So you're pulling what you hope is the best of the worst. But that's not saying much if you don't put an infrastructure in place to help these young men become productive citizens as well as productive athletes, because they are first-generation millionaires. Some of them only went to school as a way to get away from a life of crime. And that being said, there's not a huge population of problems in the NFL, but they get magnified. And the NFL for years would say, well, one bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch. We can just get rid of that guy. But what we found out with the Ray Rice incident and many others, that all of a sudden everyone pays attention and you're held to a higher standard. So when you go to your corporate sponsors and you say, hey, look, we need you to pay another $1 billion for our rights, They're going to say, well, you know what, we need you to clean up your act, or else we're pulling it away.
Yeah, and let me jump in there because we're almost out of time then. How much responsibility then does the NFL bear in providing the nurturing, mentoring, supportive environment for these kids who are really not ready for what they're about to be thrust into?
I think they have a huge responsibility to do it now, because it not only protects their investment, but it also helps improve a life.
And by the way, I just want to mention one of your former teammates, Michael Strahan.
Oh, love him.
You got to be so proud. Inducted into the Hall of Fame.
It's great to be Strahan, isn't it?
It is good to be Strahan these days, sure is. It's not so bad to be Carl Banks either.
Well,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
It's good to have you.